Nothing in the Lou Brydges Show is intended to be legal analysis, legal advice, or legal recommendations that would be applicable to your particular situation. Everyone in foreclosure or underwater with their mortgage are encouraged to seek legal counsel for a review of your specific situation. Welcome to the weekly broadcast of the Lou Brydges Show, telling the truth about the foreclosure crisis and the greatest financial crime in history that created it. Are you in foreclosure, at risk of foreclosure, or underwater with your mortgage? Do you know someone who is? Every week on this show, you'll get real answers from a real attorney. Lou Brydges will explain options in the foreclosure process. He'll talk about defective mortgages, mortgage restructuring, loan modification, short sale negotiation, and discuss what to look for when choosing a foreclosure defense attorney. Lou is an experienced foreclosure defense lawyer on the front lines of mortgage defense and litigation. Lou's dedicated to helping you keep your property. And now, it's time for the Lou Brydges Show and the truth about foreclosure. Here's your host, Lou Brydges.
Good morning, Chicago. Another beautiful Saturday morning. I hope you're going to join us later today at the Rockin' the Troops out at Cantigny Park in Wheaton. We're going to have music there, snacks, beverages, military display area. Bring the kids. And we're going to be in the WIND tent, and you can stop by and meet Mike and I, and our families are going to be there, and some of the staff from my partner, hopefully will be there, Scott O. If you have any questions or something, you can ask us. We're going to have some flyers. And
hey, Ronnie Dunn is going to be performing there. It's going to be great.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to it. So we hope we see you there later today. We got to get to some the news, though, because there's been a lot of developments this past week in the foreclosure field. And, we call this the greatest crime spree in history that caused it by the Wall Street investment banks that bundled and packaged these mortgage-backed securities and intentionally created this foreclosure mess because they were placing bets, hedge bets, buying the credit default swaps so that they would make the huge profit on that. And we've often said that on Wall Street, when you can see the future, you can really steal a lot of money. And when you create a future that is going to lead to a lot of foreclosures and defaults, which was their intention all along. And then so they could buy the credit, the derivatives and make the profit there. Well, the big trial has started. The New York Times has 3 reporters covering this trial that started on Monday. It's the Fabrice Torre, the former Goldman Sachs trader. And there's a picture of him arriving at federal court in Manhattan for the civil trial over the failed investment product. This is just over one credit default, one CDO, collateralized debt obligation. Goldman Sachs made $15 million in fees, and the firm's client, the hedge fund that bet against it, which is all Goldman people, Paulson and Company, made an estimated $1 billion. See, this is what the country needs to understand, is that this was a systematic crime spree perpetrated by some very, very clever, intelligent people over a 10-year period. Bundling and packaging mortgage-backed securities, doing anything to get the homeowners to sign for more and more and more by artificially inflating the value, and then selling these mortgage-backed securities to the public employee pension funds, giving them a guarantee so that they wouldn't, sue them later for the fraud, and then making these massive bets that there would be a large number of defaults because they created the thing intentionally so there would be a lot of defaults. And Goldman Sachs is not a party to this lawsuit. You know why? Because they paid $550 million penalty right at the start, right at the beginning, before it got anywhere. So, okay, well, you got us in this one. $550 million penalty. Of course, they made $1 billion, and the hedge fund made $1 billion. So, I mean, I guess they'll never do that again. Get fined $550 million for perpetrating a fraud that they make $1 billion on. Boy, the government's really on the ball there. But anyway, now they also paid the $15 million. No, they didn't pay that. They also collected the $15 million in fees. But they paid a $550 million penalty solely so they didn't have to admit any wrongdoing. You see, nobody has gone to jail yet, with the exception of the guy whose name escapes me from Taylor Bean Financial, who's in jail. But that's the only one who's gone to jail out of this whole thing. These criminal cases are hard to prove, and that's why the government, in this case, the Securities and Exchange Commission, is going after this Fabrice Torre. a young Frenchman who was the Goldman Sachs trader who put the whole thing together. So enough about that. Bank of America was also sued this past week, accused of racketeering. The RICO statute that you may have heard about. RICO stands, R-I-C-O, stands for Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organizations. It was a statute that was actually originally written by a law professor who I happen to know, Professor Bakke from Notre Dame University about 25 years ago. I think it was right when I was getting started in the practice of law in 1980. This RICO statute came out. The purpose was to go after organized crime. Well, and it's being used to go after organized crime. It's being used to sue Bank of America, which is an organized criminal organization, according to the allegations in this complaint. The basis is, of course, the recent whistleblowers that have come out. And, we really need these whistleblowers, should be commended. They were certainly doing a bad thing, but, they came forth. And we need more and more of those because that is going to be the key. I've always said the truth will come out eventually. Because every lie requires 3 lies to cover it up, and every one of those 3 more. And eventually the lies will bury themselves of their own weight. So these 6 whistleblowers that came out and very consistently said that Bank of America's policy was to sandbag to homeowners applying for loan modifications. And if you've ever applied for a loan modification, you're probably saying, oh, really? Tell me about it. They lied, and they were specifically told in meetings of 60 and 70, per group. They were told by the group leaders, and these 6 were in different groups of supposedly customer relations managers who were supposed to be handling the modifications under the HAMP program, and then later pursuant to an agreement that Bank of America entered into with the United States of America, we the people, the government, who was going after them, was going to prosecute them for abuses in the foreclosure process. Abuses in the foreclosure process, again, that's the nice word for fraud upon the courts of our land. Mass fraud, systematic fraud, fraudulent documents, forged documents, fabricated documents, the whole thing, fraud upon the court. And, some of the judges are even waking up and saying, boy, it's about time I maybe looked at these documents a little closer, and we're glad to see that. Even in Cook County, they're looking at the documents closer. Who would have ever thought? Any event, and I just want to point out that in Lake and McHenry County, the judges have always been very much on the ball, but and to a large extent in DuPage County also. Kane County, we're having some trouble with the new judge there, but I really am not supposed to talk too much about specific cases on the air, so let me just leave it at that. But as a private citizen, I will tell you that the judiciary has dropped the ball on this foreclosure thing. There has been a number of lawyers like myself who have been pointing out for years the contradictions in the documents, the obvious forged nature and fabricated the missing documents, the gaps in the chain of title, the systematic unlawful activity in the inducement of the mortgage, the fraudulent inducement, the deceptive inducement, the unlawful inducement, the lack of standing, the gaps in the chain of title, the inconsistencies in the affidavits. We've been pointing this all out for years. And then, it's only recently that the judges have started to really pay a little more attention and actually, oh, wow, geez, because, I had a judge in the appellate court say to me one time, Mr. Brydges, what you're talking about are systemic problems. I can't, and I say, yes, systemic problems, it very likely applies to this case. You might look for more of this, and Mike has some sites, some websites we want to get on each segment. Websites that you
come join us at Facebook. Talk about it with your friends. Share it. Facebook.com/The Lou Brydges Show. That's Brydges with a Y. You can also find out more at our website, Fight Illinois Foreclosures with an S.com. And by all means, give us a call. We'll help you out. 224-513-1231. You got a question for the show? You need to know something about what's going on in your situation? We'll be happy to help you out.
I want to emphasize this. We're going to break here in a little bit for sports and weather, but I want to emphasize the loan modification process. The thing has become now is to use these things with competent legal counsel to force modification and restructuring on the reluctant bank server, because they are supposed to be modifying these mortgages. There are programs, there are regulations. We can force modification and restructuring. That's a reduction of principal balance to reflect the true fair market value of the property. But you need an attorney to do that because you can't do it alone. They're going to run you around alone. And you got to be very careful for these modification, outfits that charge you money up front, which is illegal if they're not attorneys, to charge up money up front. We had a client this week who called us who was taken for $2,000. And I want to commend again Lisa Madigan for her efforts in going after these modification scam operations. And she had a couple more this week that the attorney generals, and in this, the one our client was involved in, the perpetrators were arrested by the FBI. So we're going to break now. Join us. I'm going to talk more about the lawsuits, and we haven't read our Thomas Jefferson quote, but remember, people, don't give up the land. There are things you can do if you know anyone facing foreclosure, in foreclosure, or if you're just underwater and current on your mortgage. The restructuring and modifications are the key, and we can get that accomplished, but you need to act. And this is very important. It's about the land. Don't give it to these bankers.
Welcome back to the Lou Brydges Show with Louis Brydges, one of Chicago's leading foreclosure defense attorneys. Here's Lou to tell you what to look for when hiring a foreclosure defense attorney and how to avoid being conned. On AM 560, The Answer.
Welcome back, folks. This show, we took on Mike, and I forgot to mention, I introduced Mike before the segment. Of course, my wingman, Mike Main.
Hello, Chicagoland.
And our producer, Debbie Schreiber, who doesn't like to go on the air there, but is doing an outstanding job. And I want to thank all the listeners, our support. Our Facebook page is, I guess, growing steadily and pretty well, and we're getting a lot of calls and a lot of positive comments, and we appreciate that, because the purpose of the show is, all the marketing people want me to, always focus on promoting the law firm, but the reason I took on the show was to get the word out, and sort of the secondary thing would be, of course, to mention the law firm, but I really wanted there needs to be more and more people talking about this, because there is this humongous thing of historical significance. It's going to be, the chapters and volumes and history books written about, because this is a very complicated thing, and it's so misunderstood. But, and a lot of it comes down to just, classic stuff where, so many of our clients are reluctant to do what's called a strategic default. Not because they don't recognize that it's clearly the best thing to do from a financial standpoint. This is the most financially prudent thing to do. And that whatever the outcome, and there's about 3 different outcomes that can occur, but it's a win-win-win. All 3 of them are you're going to be better off.
Assuming you're underwater.
Assuming you're underwater, right. If you're underwater, and there's very few circumstances in which, it would not be the financially prudent thing. And we just lay out the options. We don't make the decision for you. We don't try to sell you. I try to stress that when we provide our free consultations, and that's what we do for everybody, give you a free consultation, usually about an hour. All I have to do is call in, go through not a screening process, but talk to intake people, get information, so we can review the documents, and we give everybody a 1-hour free consultation. And we don't try to sell. Make very clear, we discuss with my partner, we are not going to try to be salesmen. We are going to be professional attorneys. We are going to look at the situation that the client brings to us. We are going to give them a legal analysis, consultation, and if they ask, recommendations. But we're just going to lay out the options that you may have, and the pros and cons, the consequences, and the cost, of course. And we try to make the cost very affordable, because what we've tried to do is put together a situation in which Americans can band together. We can have a group of people, and each one of them are going to get sophisticated, experienced litigation and representation for an affordable fee, because we're all going to band together and pay a modest monthly fee, sort of like an insurance almost. And that because we're collecting a modest monthly retainer from our clients, and that varies. Single moms, we always give a break. People on disability or that are on Social Security, we never charge more than about 25% of your take home. And so that, the rich people, we charge more. If you're living in a $750,000 house, we charge a little more. But we all get everybody. We got this past week, we've got 4 principal reductions: 2 for $100,000, 1 for $80,000, and what was the other one? $60,000. Yeah. Now, this took us about a year, and we didn't take any of the runaround. When the bank gives us, we lost the documents. No, you didn't, because we know we ask us for the computer printout, because the computer printout tells us when they did receive them. Oh, you did receive them, and you did not act within 30 days on the application like you're required to do under the regulations. So basically, now you violated the law again. And, I don't like to be a stoolie or a rat, but, I've got an obligation to a client. You violated the law, the regulation. You did not comply with the terms. And, that's what we have is a broad front approach where we've got paralegals working under the supervision of attorneys that are totally versed in the loan modification department and the loan modification regulations, procedures, and requirements. And we have it streamlined. And, sometimes we're applying for modification under several different programs. But again, if you're underwater, and for those of you who don't remember, underwater means that you owe more in the property than it's worth. Modification is generally probably not a good deal by itself, modification by itself. You need restructuring, principal reduction. If you owe $300,000, if the mortgage is $300,000 and the fair market value of the home is only $200,000, you are overpaying by almost $1,000 per month. Over the life of the mortgage, if you were to pay the 30 years, you would overpay by about $300,000 for something that's only worth $200,000. That's why it's not financially improved. And you're paying the taxes and the maintenance.
And it doesn't do much good to just put it at the end of the loan either, which is what a lot of the mods do.
Yeah, no, there are some situations. I mean, if you've got a particular family situation, you've got 2 years left to kids, so the kids can graduate from, a really good high school in the area, and then you and your wife are going to, retire and move to Florida or something, and you can't get a restructuring, but you get a modification. But the thing is, if you have that big, you're going to have a hard time selling the property, because if you owe $300,000 on a $200,000 property, yours may be stuck there because you won't be able to sell it because, you're going to get a payoff letter unless you're going to come up with $100,000. You're going to go to a closing selling your house and you're going to have to come up with $100,000. And now you can start your retirement. So that's why it's very important to get that principal reduced to the fair market value of the property so you can start to build up some equity. And you know what? The owner of the mortgage, it's in their better interest too, because then they have a note that's fully secured by a mortgage that is, on a house that's worth more than the note, or at least, maybe, 10% more than the note, but it's something. The homeowner is going to be far more likely to pay. The note's fully secured, but who's been sabotaging this? People don't understand. These banks don't loan the money. It's not their money. They are the servicer. 99% of the mortgages in this country, the banks are the servicer. The 12 major banks, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, U.S. Bank, Bank of America, they are the servicer. It's not their money. And they make $300 or more they make 30 times more servicing a mortgage in foreclosure. Now, if you're Wells Fargo and you're servicing 7 million mortgages, you make about $10 a month. For those that are paying, that's $70 million a month. If you have, which is a nice chunk of change for opening our bank, you open the envelope, you clear the check, you forward it to the various trust or that owns the mortgage. But if you have 1 million of those 7 million in foreclosure, you're making $300 a month on that. That's $300 million on that 1 million alone, plus 60 million on the others. So you go from 70 million to 360 million. Allow me, for purposes of making the math easy, to call it a difference of $300 million. Multiplied by 12 months, you're talking $3.6 billion of additional revenue by keeping people in foreclosure and pushing them into foreclosure rather than giving them the loan modifications. This is why the greatest financial crime spree in history that created this mess continues to this day. This is why you get the runaround in the mortgage modification application process. And this is why I think you need an attorney, and this is why the American people need to band together and not give up the land. The Thomas Jefferson quote. Mike wants to give you contact information, but I'm going real strong here. Mike, contact information.
Facebook.com/The Lou Brydges Show. That's Brydges with a Y. Don't forget, you can actually check out our past podcasts there as well. So you missed the show last week, you can hear it there. FightIllinoisForeclosures.com. That's foreclosures with an S. A lot of information there. It's our corporate site. And 224-513-1231. 224-513-1231. We'll be happy to help you.
And American people, I want you to remember, the quote from Thomas Jefferson, a little over 200 years ago. Thomas Jefferson warned future generations of America, us in particular. He said the banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. If you, the American people, ever allow these private banks to control the issue of currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and the corporations that will grow up around them will deprive you, the people, of all your property until your children wake up homeless on the continent your forefathers conquered. He foresaw that we were going to conquer the entire continent, for rightly or wrongly. Some of the Native American Indians may feel that it was taken from them, but that's another issue. But the point I'm making is this creation of this credit default swaps and this thing is issuing currency. The artificial inflation of the cost of American real estate by 131% over a 10-year period from 1998 to 2008 creates $5.5 trillion of illusory capital, multiplied times 56 million over mortgages. They converted that capital into currency by selling it to the public employee retirement funds. It's a sophisticated criminal operation to deprive the American people of the property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their forefathers conquered. Don't let it happen. Stand up. We've been through the problems and crises before, and we've come through them by getting together and banding together. Never give up the land.
Brydges of the law firm Brydges & O & Associates, one of the leading foreclosure defense firms in the Chicago area, rejoins you now on the Lou Brydges Show. Here's Lou on how you might avoid foreclosure and deal with a mortgage that's underwater.
Welcome back, folks. Again, we hope you join us later today at the Rockin' the Troops. We're very proud to be supporting the troops and going out there and looking forward to meeting a lot of them. My personal trainer, actually, Bill Miller, who I told him if he didn't start listening to the show, I was going to mention his name. So there I did it. Who's actually one of the finest personal trainers, served a tour in Iraq. I made the mistake of calling him a former ex-Marine once. He said there's no such thing as an ex-Marine. So a formerly active Marine, Bill Miller, my personal trainer. Hopefully he's going to come out there with his family, and I hope there'll be a lot of other troops out there. So this is going to be our question and answer segment, and Mike, as Mike, we encourage a lot of people to call in and set up free consultations, and Mike and other intake personnel, we've got about 4 that take information from people, and so that when you meet the attorney's got a little bit of briefing, and we got to try to do it efficiently, and but we try to, we end up giving everybody about an hour personal consultation for free, and it's good to prepare first to gather some of the documents, and we have the intake people to do that. So, and a lot of the intake people ask Mike questions, and of course the intake people aren't attorneys and can't give legal advice, but they do forward the questions, and they say, well, the attorney says, and but anyway, well, what are some of the common questions you get?
Well, I've got 3 for you this week, and they all kind of lead together. We'll start off with, do I need to be behind in order to qualify for a modification? Do I need to be behind on my payments in order to qualify for a modification?
No, you don't technically, but in our experience that, in the strategic default situation, we have a couple of ways we go about it. Some people that don't want to default, what we do is we get a preliminary kind of look-see at an audit, an investigation, so that we know that we got some leverage, some points to raise about the unlawful acts and the inducement of the mortgage, and on the gaps in the chain of title. And then we say, we have this. We've been representing these people. We represent these people for the purpose of applying for loan modification. We've conducted an investigation. We've analyzed it, and we found that there were many unlawful acts and errors, and omissions and fraudulent activity in the origination of the loan. And we found that there is some real problems with the securitization, something called failed securitization, that the transfers of the mortgage weren't done properly. The note and mortgage were separated. There's a question of who owns it, which means there's a question whether this bank is the right servicer. We have all this, and we really like, these people would really like a modification if they're underwater, restructuring. And, we'd ask that you do this. And while we're going to negotiating this process, we are going to, the client is going to temporarily suspend payment of the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So take your time, because you want to take a year, you want to take 2 years, you want to take 3 years to do it. We're not going anywhere, and we've got the evidence in hand. You're not going to be able to foreclose. It's not going to be a slam dunk, and you're very likely, if you bring a foreclosure lawsuit, well, then our client's going to have the option of asserting counterclaims for violations of the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, Fair Debt Credit Reporting Act, and the Consumer Fraud Act. And then we're going to have a federal lawsuit, and it's going to go on maybe 3, 4, 5 years. And during that time, our client's going to be living in the house, paying a modest monthly fee, which is about about a quarter of what their home payment would be. The bank's going to, the servicing bank it doesn't really harm them, because they're just going to pass the thing on to the owner of the mortgage, but they're going to have to pay the taxes, they're going to have to pay the insurance, and at the end of the day, that ain't going to be on the table. We're going to be talking restructuring, and like I said, this week we've gotten we had 4 fine results, restructurings, and so there's a win-win-win situation. If you're underwater by $100,000 and you go through this process, we're either going to get a restructuring or we're not. But if we don't get a restructuring, you're going to live in the house for about 25% of the mortgage payment for about 3 or 4 years, and you can save up some money. And then at the end of the day, we'll negotiate something. Maybe a short sale, or maybe we have investors that maybe will buy it from the bank and then lease it back to you with an option to buy in 2 years. There's a lot of different things you can do rather than continue to, overpay by $1,000 per month if you're $100,000 underwater.
Okay, now that was a great answer. However, but I'm going to rephrase it. My bank told me in order to modify, I needed to get behind in payments.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing about the $300 a month versus the $10 a month. That's the thing that if the Bank of America, if you read these affidavits from 6 individuals in different parts of their loan modification services department, all saying consistently the same thing, that they were told to lie to customers, to tell them that they didn't receive the documents, that the application was under review. And that they needed to be in default, and because they get the money from foreclosure, they make 30 times the amount in foreclosure. You got to understand, you may say, I can't believe that the people would be that dishonest. Read these affidavits. I read them on the air last week. I'll read them on the air next week again, and start looking around. Just go to stopforeclosurefraud.com, which is a nationwide service out of Florida that gathers all these. Go to Living Lies, the site by Neil Garfield, and there's a lot of other sites. There's a whole movement afoot, ground roots movement. Get a part of it. Do not give up the land to these coke-snorting, whoremongering Wall Street investment bankers.
And go to our Facebook page and listen to last week's program. Facebook.com/The Lou Brydges Show, 224-513-1231.
I can't believe I just said that.
We now return to the Lou Brydges Show, telling the truth about the foreclosure crisis and the greatest financial crime in history. Here's Lou Brydges, an attorney on the front lines of the ongoing battle for our land.
Yes, and on the front lines, and it's been quite a pleasure to be there. I've been doing it now for about 4 years, and since the very start, back in 2009 is when things really started to ramp up. Of course, everyone remembers September of 2008 when Lehman Brothers was forced to declare itself bankrupt. And, people need to understand the banks were not bailed out. Okay, there was a capital infusion to try to stimulate the economy, but the bailout was AIG, because AIG, along with Lehman Brothers, were selling these credit default swaps and making a ton of money doing it. But it's like selling 10 insurance policies on a house, and then the house burns down. And why didn't they wonder? Well, geez, why are you buying 10 insurance policies on this house that you built, Goldman Sachs? And the reason is that they're making a ton of money in corporate world. You make a ton of money for a couple of years if you're big level executives or commission salesmen, and you get $50, $60 million bonuses. You really don't care a lot of these people, they don't care what happens to the company 2-3 years down the road. They make their 60, 70, $80 million bonuses is what they pay on Wall Street a lot. And then you're gone. And, these people just have no ethics. You should follow this trial of this. He's a very handsome young Frenchman, was 28 years old. He's now 34, Fabrice Touré. But, these people, and I know these type of people. I had, when I got out of, I had some friends that when I was back in the 80s that went to Wall Street and went to school with. And they were really, really bright. I mean, I never could win at poker with these people, but, they just, it was all about just making money. Mike has another question that we want to get to.
I sure do. Okay, so people are being, this is not actually a question from a client. This is more talking about what I'm dealing with clients. So people are being told by their servicers that while they're working on a modification, that they should ignore the foreclosure, not worry about it. You're going through modification. Is this what people should be doing, or shouldn't they be going to court?
Absolutely not. No, this is a common thing. I've heard this 500 times, at least 500 times, and I've presented motions to vacate default judgments hundreds of times in front of judges because a default judgment has been entered. And the basis for moving to vacate it is, the client was an application pending for modification and had been dealing with a customer relations manager, a CRM, or somebody at one of the servicing banks, and had been told repeatedly, don't worry about the foreclosure lawsuit, you're going to get the modification. And the judge says, really? Well, that's interesting, but what does it say on the summons, Mr. Brydges? And I say, I know what it says in the summons, Your Honor. It says you have 30 days within which to file an appearance in this lawsuit, or a default judgment may and will be entered against you. And, what about that? Don't you understand? Well, I argue that, hey, they were talking with not somebody off the street that told them to ignore this. They were talking with the plaintiff's representative. And I have an affidavit here. And sometimes the judges will vacate the judgment, but sometimes, particularly in Cook County, it's like, the attitude in Cook County for a lot of the judges is just, they want to clear their dockets by just pushing through the foreclosures as quickly as possible without any regard to, these other what I call equitable matters. The funny thing is, the irony is that they would clear their foreclosure dockets a lot faster if they would allow some of these legitimate defenses to be asserted, because that forces the banks to then restructure and modify the mortgage. So again, if you just go with the truth, things will turn out okay. It's when you start making decisions based on clearing your docket and things like that things get messed up. Just do the job and decide the case based on the truth and the evidence before you and the evidence of systemic problems. These aren't systemic problems. This is widespread, systematic, without exception, fraud by these major bank servicers. And if you're going to allow them to get away with it, I just could never understand why you would turn your back on your neighbors for these wheeler dealers who have ruined and brought down a world economy out in this handful, let alone thousands of people out in New York that brought down a world economy and are continuing to perpetrate crimes upon the land. And why you would turn your back on your friends and neighbors? The people of the state of Illinois, for example, constituted a recorder of deeds office and passed a Conveyances Act that says, and a Recorders Act. The bank set up this MERS system, and for many years, the judges were giving MERS, the authenticity of a government agency. It was a privately held electronic registry that botched the records of 56 million American homes. I'm sorry, does that answer your question?
That does a very nice job, yes.
Do not just ignore a lawsuit.
Go to court. Go to court.
We can preserve grounds for appeal if the judges, and the judges are coming around now. I mean, they're starting to realize that, hey, there's been fraud on a mass scale perpetrated in my court on my watch. And, and also there's some judges around the country that are making themselves real heroes. Judge Rakoff out of New York. I mean, the judges around the country, there are some that I say they're going to be naming law school buildings after, that future generations of law students will be studying in these buildings named after some of these judges. And they'll be studying the cases decided by some of the other judges, not favorably. But we're blessed with a very fine judicial system and diligent judges for the most part. There will always be exceptions, but
in other words, go to court while you're going through the
But you need a good lawyer.
modification.
You need a good lawyer. Yes, you need to go through the court in the modification process. And, again, we've gotten a number this week. But the key thing is just don't give up the land. There are many other options that, it's difficult to talk about on a radio show and explain them. But, fighting foreclosure, getting a short sale to a friendly, who's going to lease the property back to you with an option to buy. There's a lot of different options that may be available to you, but never give up the land. Fight for truth and justice.
Welcome back to the Lou Brydges Show with Louis Brydges, one of Chicago's leading foreclosure defense attorneys. Here's Lou to tell you what to look for when hiring a foreclosure defense attorney and how to avoid being conned on AM 560. The Answer.
Welcome back, people. Our final segment here. And, again, I want to remind people, we had a client that came in, a new client that came in today. They have been taken for $2,000 by one of these supposed loan modification firms. Nobody can take, except a lawyer can take money from you up front for loan modification services. So don't fall victim to one of these scams. Lisa Madigan in the Attorney General's office have been going at it. Every time we hear one, we tell her about it, and she's been doing outstanding work. And before I've told you, I recognize this is a conservative talk radio station, and you may have your opinions about her father, and certainly, but from a lawyer's standpoint, I've been a lawyer in this state for 33 years, Lisa Madigan is doing an outstanding job as the Attorney General. I mean, it's a top attorney, in our state, and she's just carried out her duties from my perspective, in an exemplary fashion. We should all be very proud. I'm not saying, anything about endorsing her for governor or anything. I say she's done a fine job as Attorney General, and apparently I'm glad to see that she's going to be staying there, because we need somebody of that right now, because there are a lot of scams. The other thing is that, lawyers are like, they specialize, and they concentrate their practices in different areas. And litigation is an area that, in foreclosure defense and even negotiating a modification is part and parcel of litigation. Those are the kind of lawyers that, most lawyers never go into court. Real estate lawyers and things like that, they do a fine job. The transactional attorneys and what they do, and they're needed, and there's a need for them. But the litigation attorney is a special breed, in my view, and requires a certain type, and it requires a thorough knowledge of the Code of Civil Procedure and the Supreme Court rules. And it requires a lot of experience in pleadings and in writing briefs and motions and court appearances and using that. Check out our website. We talk about some of these things. But if you're going to hire an attorney, and also you need to, in this foreclosure field, even if you just want to negotiate a modification or restructuring, the attorney needs to understand about the forensic and the securitization investigations. Those are crucial, because those give us the ammunition, the evidence that we can use to either defend a foreclosure and also to force a modification. And if necessary, these banks could be sued. And my partner and I, we're going to start getting more into the consumer fraud lawsuits and the Fair Debt collection practices and Fair Debt credit reporting. Take the offensive. We've been on the defensive for about 4 years now, and now things are changing, and the worm is starting to turn. But you need competent legal counsel. Mike's got some contact information for you.
Facebook.com/The Lou Brydges Show. That's Brydges with a Y, Brydges. 224-513-1231. Give us a call. We will help you out.
And remember, never give up the land. We're going to heed the warning from Thomas Jefferson, and we are going to fight for truth and justice together.
And even if you're going through a modification process, go to court.
Yes, and go to court. If you don't ignore the summons. But we can avoid court loss also if you're current on your mortgage and underwater. Anyway, join us out at the Rockin' the Troops.
You've been listening to the weekly radio broadcast of the Lou Brydges Show with attorney Louis Brydges, telling the truth about foreclosure. Have you received threats of foreclosure? Are you in a foreclosure right now, seeking a loan modification, considering strategic default, or any other legal action? Know and protect your rights, and do not give up the land. Lou Brydges' passion is to help you keep your home and achieve your legal goals. To receive a free consultation, which may help you decide how to defend against foreclosure, understand your options, and learn what to look for in choosing a foreclosure defense attorney, call 224-513-1231. That's 224-513-1231. Or visit FightIllinoisForeclosures.com. That's FightIllinoisForeclosures.com. Get real answers from a real foreclosure defense firm and discover the legal tools at your disposal Tune into AM 560 The Answer next Saturday morning at 8 for the Lou Brydges Show, telling the truth about foreclosure.